Welcome, everybody, to our Lift Up Women in Life Sciences live event. We're back again this month, and today our topic's going to be about showing up, standing up, speaking up, which is all about how to cultivate your leadership voice. And we have got three phenomenal leaders within our life sciences space that are really keen to share their journeys, their experiences, and really kind of how they've built confidence and cultivated very strong leadership skills and techniques throughout their journey. So, if you're completely and utterly new to the world of Lift Up, we have been going now for nearly 3 years. We launched in 2022, and Lift Up was born really off the back of Fraser Dove International, which is an executive search life sciences talent consultancy. I've been a part of this business now for 4 years, but it's been established for 11. And really, it's an executive search, senior level leadership talent organization where we have got an extensive global reach of women and leaders within the life sciences space. And a group of internal ambassadors thought, what can we do to try and give back to the industry and really help build a community group that could connect, inspire, and champion women really across the life sciences space, right from early academia all the way through to C-suite. And that is ultimately what Lift Up's mission is all about. So it's been 3 years now. We've done a broadcast every single month. So I think I've had something like 18 to 90 key speakers. We've done, 30 odd live broadcasts, and we've now had way over, I think, 120, 130,000 global views. And we get a lot of rewatches from these lives. So thank you so much for anybody that's been a part of this journey and continues to dial in. So I'm Louise Williams. For those of you that are new, I am the MD here. I've been in life sciences now for about 11 years, but the world of staffing for 20 odd years. And I'm really keen to bring in Sandra Poole, Erin Federman, and Daniela Sica, who are all going to be our key speakers today to talk about show up, stand up, and speak up. So what I'd love to also do is say to you all dialing in now for the network, please dial in and put into the comments where it is that you're calling from. We get an extensive global reach across all the continents here dialing in. So it's really great to see what part of life sciences that you're working within, and also for you all to connect with each other, because that's ultimately what this is about. And as we navigate and go through this live broadcast, what we'd love to do is get you popping in some questions into the comments. So put in a queue in front of any question you've got, and I'm going to try and navigate through those comments and bring those questions up for our key speakers as we go. But without any further ado, I'd love to bring in Sandra Poole, and she's going to do our introduction, or her introduction, for us today. Thank you, Sandra, for joining us. Over to you.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be part of this conversation. Women make up nearly half of the life sciences workforce, yet representation today, leadership and board roles still lags. My own journey from chemical engineer to chief operating officer and board director has been, very much shaped as much by building confidence and presence as by competence. So I started my career in Canada as a chemical engineer, driven by, the big question, how do complex systems work and how can we design them to solve real problems? And, this curiosity really carried me through my early technical roles to my global leadership roles, and then on to sort of more executive roles. I spent over half of my career at Genzyme. At the time, Genzyme was one of the largest, most successful biotech companies in the world. And there I faced some of the most defining challenges in my career, from turning around a manufacturing plant in a crisis under FDA scrutiny, to moving my young family to Belgium to build a flagship manufacturing plant that would become a global hub for rare disease therapies, to running later global manufacturing for 6 commercial products and 2,000 employees. Those experiences really taught me that leadership isn't just about technical results. It's about presence, showing up with steadiness, and really inspiring confidence in all stakeholders, regulators, investors, executives, team members, even patients and family members. So after Genzyme, I served in executive and COO roles for several biotech companies, really helping to advance very cool science and promising therapies into the clinic. Currently, I am COO of Mythic Therapeutics, and I'm on the board of directors for Travere. I'm also advising a number of young entrepreneurs and founders. And across all of these chapters, the common thread has been really learning how to find my voice, how to build my confidence, and then lead authentically. Even when you're in a room where, I might be the only woman at the table. So that's what I'm looking forward to sharing with you all today. Thank
That's
you.
fantastic. Thank you, Sandra. And what a career, very inspirational. So thank you so much for joining us today. And Erin, if you'd love to do an introduction to the audience for us as well, please.
Yes, thank you. And Sandra, to follow after that, it's a bit like the Oscars and trying to follow, I don't know, Meryl Streep, because that was a fantastic introduction. So I hope I can do it justice here. And something you said at the end, to flip the way you presented, the reason I'm so passionate about women in life sciences and just women in business in general is that experience of coming into the room and being the only female at the table. And early in my career, there were a lot of questions. Why aren't we here? I felt like it was unfair, and I wasn't really looking at it strategically. And so something I've learned over the years is if we want to be there, we need to put ourselves there. And so I really love this concept of lift up, because we lift each other up, but we also have a responsibility to look at the next generation coming and make space for them, because it's not going to solve itself. A bit about me for the past 20 something years, which is, when I think about that, it's a bit like, oh, I've been in the life sciences industry on the commercial side. So the counterpoint to where Sandra has been working. And my story is a global story. So I'm from the US, from Ohio, but I've lived and worked across the UK, Italy, Denmark, and Germany, currently in Germany now. And I've worked across medical device and pharmaceuticals. And in the majority of the leadership roles I've had, there has been a minority of women in those groups. So the higher up that I've gone, the fewer that I see. And currently, I'm just finishing an engagement as a CCO for a medtech startup here in Germany. It's been a great experience, very gender balanced in that group that I've been very passionate about. And I think I'm here just to share my experience, how I found my voice, and just hopefully that anyone's listening knows that they need to use their voice no matter how strong, how not strong they feel like it is, how not polished it might be. You have to speak up. And that's really, really important for us to make a difference and change those statistics that Sandra brought up in the beginning.
Yeah, lovely. Very well said, Erin. And thank you for sharing, the passion behind, why joining today. That's really, really important. And, you've got to start somewhere, right? So I think sometimes there is a bit of a, at what point, but, failure is not about failing. It's just that start of growing, developing into something more. So very well said. And thank you. And certainly, last but not least, is Daniela. If you could do an introduction to the audience for us as well, please. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you very much for having me today. Good evening, good morning to our audience. So my name is Daniela Sica, and I have started my career in life science like 30 years ago, like a junior analyst in a microbiological lab. And then thanks to my bosses at that time, actually male bosses, they recognized my skills also, not just for being an analyst, but for commercial like a side of my soul, and they pushed me towards new opportunities, new challenges, and I ended up to be responsible globally for the alliance management of the CDMO I was working for, actually with headquarters in the US. I was working in Milan, but the headquarters were in the US, and the manufacturing site in Ohio. So I was traveling to Ohio quite a lot in the first 15 years of my career. And then I moved out, and I covered different roles as commercial director in several CDMOs, then moving to consulting, and also moving away from Italy for a couple of years in Barcelona. And in the end, coming back to Italy as a CCO of my last company, which was a CRO and biobank. And in December, I decided to start something for myself. So since January, I have my consulting business, and I am a consultant advisor for some companies here in Europe from the business development perspective, licensing in, licensing out, strategy of putting in place new business development team, and so on and so forth. And of course, we can talk about it later during our conversation, but being the only one around the table, the only woman around the table with men around, it's really, really interesting and a very challenging experience somehow. But yeah, survived in the end. So I think it would be a good point to discuss today, how to survive in this kind of environment. But yeah, I was
Thank
also
you,
very
Daniela.
happy in the past. Yes.
Yeah, I didn't realize you had because Erin, you mentioned Ohio, so bit of a connection there. Didn't
Exactly.
realize that. But thank you for joining. No, super excited to get into this, and for the audience's sake, you know, there's quite a lot that we're going to talk about here. We're going to talk about confidence. We're going to talk about confidence versus competence, imposter syndrome, how to best position yourself from a pay recognition perspective. So lots of sorts of things we want to get to, but very quickly back to the audience. I just want to say, if you're dialing in now, pop in where it is you're calling in from, your name. It's great to get connected with other people. And obviously, if you've got any questions for our speakers here today, pop in a little cue at the beginning of your comment, and I can try and pull out those questions for the speakers as we go throughout the live broadcast. And already, you know, we've got great people dialing in. We've got Suzanne, she's a bit of a regular here for us, so thank you so much for joining in from Germany. We've got somebody here from Berlin. You've got your LinkedIn user set to private, so I unfortunately can't see your name, but thank you for joining in. Jacqueline as well. We've got here an independent consultant in leadership, R&D and commercialization roles within the UK. So yeah, keep them coming, and some questions coming through. But we want to kick off, I think. Let's talk about your earlier voice. Let's go back a little bit in time and just have a look at, you know, when in your career did you first feel your confidence was perhaps tested? You know, how did you navigate that? I'm going to come to you with this question, Sandra.
I would say when I was first promoted into an executive role at Genzyme, so VP of Technology Development, I suddenly went from leading a very small team to overseeing 150 scientists and engineers and representing them at senior executive meetings with the research leadership, and often would find myself surrounded by some of the smartest people I've ever met. And it was intimidating at first. And I actually started working with a coach. And what she really taught me was how I needed to own the value that I was bringing to the table. And so in my case, you know, I am not a scientist, but I know how to design the manufacturing processes and how to scale to translate this brilliant science into real patient impact. And so I would sort of reframe every time I'd walk into those meetings and really make sure that I was grounded on owning the value that I would bring to the table.
I love that, owning the value in which, because sometimes it's always, you've got all the right answers or the right intent, but it's just the approach or the articulation of it. So no, that's a really good a good point. So you actually got a coach as well, so that's interesting, isn't it? Well, we've seen that throughout previous lives where mentors, sponsors or coaches have had a big impact. So that's an important element. Coming to you with the same question, sorry, Erin, what's your thoughts here?
So I'm going to go way back in time. And again, it's going to build, wasn't prepared this way, but it's going to build on what Sandra said about owning your value. And my confidence was first shaken. I was in a marketing specialist role working in insurance. I called it kind of my first big kid job. I had to wear a suit every day. And about 90 days in, my boss sat me down and she said, wow, you interview incredibly well, and you also have no idea what you're doing. And that was probably the most meaningful and hard one-on-one I've ever had.
Yeah.
And so I really went home that day feeling terrible, feeling like I was an imposter, to get to your point, feeling like I didn't deserve the job. And, you know, should I just go back to sales or hourly work that I was in before? I was also in my MBA program on Saturdays at the time. And so came back in the next day and really unpacked what she was trying to tell me. And back to owning your value, the value that I brought to the table is I'm an incredibly quick learner. I also lean into things sometimes before I'm ready, but that's what you hear from almost every leadership coach, just jump in the pool. And so I flipped my story a bit to say, I am the person that doesn't know. I am the person that can convince you that I do know. So how do we use that? And then on the back end, how do we build my foundational skills? And so to translate that for the listeners, I would just say you're going to be put in a situation where you might be out of your depth. You might be, as Sandra said, perceived to be out of your depth, but you're not. And the way that you move forward, I think, is how you frame that story in your head. Because I always look at it as jumping into a pool. We can walk in by the steps, which a lot of us like to do on the first day of vacation, but by the last day, we're just, jumping in head first, cannonball. So I like to cannonball into everything, trusting that I know how to swim. I'll come to the surface and I'll be better for that experience.
Yeah, love that. And it's a bit of a mindset thing though, isn't it? It's like, I love the word unpacking that you used, because sometimes I think you do need to unpack and then realize, like, it's not a bad thing if I don't know it all or I don't know everything. Like,
Yeah,
because
and these were things that I wouldn't have had a chance to know. So some of the skills, and I think what really worked for me is I really did think I knew how to do certain things with marketing campaigns, or when I structured presentations, how I conveyed my message. I truly believed that I was doing it the right way. So then it again was, how do we reframe that belief that you have in yourself, but just with the right things? And so that, I always remember that as one of the most transformational wobbles, I would call it, in my career. I didn't fall, but I definitely was shaken and I wobbled.
But it's how you took that information, processed that information, unpacked, leaned into what it was that you were good at, acknowledged, and it's fine that you didn't know everything, but then looked at how you could enhance upon what you didn't know. Love it. I think that's just really important, isn't it? Sometimes the confidence piece with people is because they're setting their own expectations super, super high, or they're worried that their boss's expectations are super, super high. And actually, like, you do yourself damage, don't you, really? Because when somebody's confidence is that low or is in a rut, you're never really performing in the best way. So yeah, love that story, Erin. Coming to you with the same question, Daniela, talk to us a little bit about your first experience of a confidence wobble.
Yeah, that's. I think it's also quite funny. So first time alliance management globally. I was assigned to go to Japan to negotiate a co-development contract with a Japanese affiliate of a big multinational. But the interesting thing was that this renegotiation was about the fact that my company at that time failed the formulation development, and we wanted them to pay for redevelop the product with us. So we lost, of course, reliability, and we wasted a lot of their money. And so I was sent there in Japan. We're talking about 25 years ago. So where in Japan, women were not really considered like the right person to be in the negotiation. And also English was not really the language they were using at the time. And so I was sent there, never been in Japan, never been to Tokyo. And but I came back with a new contract, renegotiated.
Good for you.
And so that was fantastic. So, but yeah, I mean, of course, when you are younger, probably you are less conscious. And so you take the risk more easily than when you are a bit older. And so I always liked being like pushed to some challenge, opportunity, and new things to do, because I think it's just the only way to grow and to learn. Yeah.
Your confidence must have really gone up after that. So if you were a bit shaky beforehand,
my ego was really bigger and bigger after that. Yeah, absolutely.
I've got to ask though, that is a big challenge. 25 years ago, Japan, different country, different main language. Like, how did you prepare yourself going into that situation?
Yeah, so I prepared myself with my R&D team, because I'm not really a technical person. So I had to be really super ready to be there with all the details and explain why we failed and why we were, in any case, the right partner to develop their formulation. That, by the way, it was launched in the end on the Japanese market, and after many years, but we made it. And so I got prepared from a technical perspective with my team, and then, of course, I mean, my, let's say, perception of my partner there was that they were very open to discuss with us. And so my approach was very positive with them, very cool, very calm, trying to explain exactly what happened and why we should have worked together again. And
So
it was just like a personal relationship that you install, that we had, that I installed already when I was talking to them over the phones at that time, because Teams was not existing. You have to remember that. And and then going there, probably they found the fact that we were traveling to Japan to talk to them was a positive approach. And so
what I'm picking up from this is that whilst, you know, a bit of a nerve-wracking experience and exercise to have to go and do, you utilized your team around you, you leveraged off of their knowledge and you pulled their experiences in, you communicated and tried to build a bit of a relationship up with them prior to maybe going and meeting with them, so you understood maybe what their expectations were, what their approach was going to be. These are all just little techniques from an audience perspective. I'm just thinking, if someone's sitting there thinking, oh goodness, I've got this going on next week or this month, you know, it's kind of what things can they do that's going to maybe ease them into that situation. So really insightful. Thank you for sharing that, Daniela. We've got some more people dialing in. I just want to quickly say we've got Lena from London. Thank you for joining us. We've got somebody else here from the US. Thank you. We've got Shantae from Colorado. We've got someone from Washington, DC. Thank you for joining us. We've got lots of people dialing in. So if you've got questions, as I said before, just in case you did miss it, just pop in a question or a Q in front of your question in the comments, and I can try and pick those through into this live broadcast as we go. So next question is more on the kind of risk and versus reward side. So, you know, if speaking up can sometimes feel quite risky, especially if you're in a boardroom, depending on the environment that you may be in. But how do you decide as leaders now, when is it worth taking that risk? Quite an important thing, because, you know, you do sit in meetings and sometimes you sort of think, got to pick and choose my place here. How do you help navigate that? I'll come to you, Sandra, first with this question.
Yeah, you know, that's it's a great question, and I tend to think about it more as risk versus benefit.
Yeah.
And you know, whether it's as a board director or a member of an executive team, I'm always sort of weighing that risk versus benefit. So, for example, in a recent sort of a board discussion, you know, I was pushed for a faster, sort of more aggressive development path. It was not the most popular position to have in the room, but I was anchoring it around sort of the mission of the company and sort of the broader goal of what we were trying to achieve, not just because I was trying to, you know, to show that I can go faster or whatever. But I think that the bigger risk in leadership is sometimes, you know, the quiet one where you choose not to speak when really action is needed. And so, because it can be easy to do that, you just don't rock the boat. But it's really about the risk benefit and putting it in the context of the mission, or I think about the patient impact. Is it important to sort of focalize a different path? That's how I think about it.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a really important, and I think you're absolutely right. Risk and reward is a very branded term, but I do think that risk versus benefit is actually a nicer way of looking at it. Not Daniela, Erin, I'll come to you quickly with this question before Daniela. What are your thoughts?
So I love what you said, Sandra, and I was going to say something very similar, but as you were talking, I was also thinking about, from the audience perspective, sometimes it's about feeling versus fact. So the risk benefit, absolutely, you have to think about what would happen if I don't say something. Is there going to be a performance impact? Is there going to be a liability? What would be the danger of leaving this unsaid? Something I've also learned, especially as a woman in business, is how to anchor the passion that I feel into a factual foundation. Because I think the risk comes with how it's responded to or how it's viewed. And earlier in my career, I would have what I look back and say, not say that I might have a big ego too, but they were correct assessments or correct ideas. The way I conveyed them, there was far too much feeling and passion that clouded that discussion. And the feedback I got, I heard that as, don't speak up. There's not a place for you here. We don't want to hear from you. Which, while I still think there is some of that, if we're all being very honest, that women's voices are often sidelined, I have been able to mitigate that tremendously by making sure that if I'm very excited about something or I feel super strongly about an idea, that I find a way to just give it almost anchors and say, okay, let me sandwich this between business concepts so that people have a way to digest what I'm the middle of the sandwich, which might be me getting excited and jumping up and down, it is held firm. So I always decide if it's worth taking that risk if I can think of those anchors. And if I can't, then I realize, oh, this is just something I feel. You know, Sandra's put the budget up. I think my department has not enough money and I'm responding in that way. Let me hold that thought until I can say, hey, if you cut my budget by 25%, I cannot deliver on these KPIs by the end of Q3, like we all agreed 5 minutes ago. So that's kind of how I approach it.
Yeah, I really like that. Absorbing everything that you're saying there, Erin. I think it's so important I do think though that sometimes we have to kind of keep that emotional feeling side still in there sometimes, because sometimes gut feel or a feeling can sometimes be the right outcome. And you're right with what you're saying, Erin, I understand, but it's like you just want to make sure that you're also getting that balance, don't you? Because sometimes if you go too much down the complete like fact hard kind of evidence side, like I think that's what really brings the dynamic to leadership panels, when you've got a diversity of genders and diversity of thought, and you've got that bit of a mix of gut feeling sometimes versus, like you've just said, the facts, and Sandra said, tying it to the mission and the vision, and actually like
that's what I'm saying. She said mission and vision.
Yeah,
and that's exactly what you're talking about. That's so important.
Yeah,
Because that's
love it.
the emotive way people can connect.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Daniela,
can I
sorry,
just
Sandra,
add
you go for it.
point
Yeah.
on that? I think it's, I mean, I think that's a really important point about, you know, the facts. I mean, really knowing the data sort of in and out. And I think it's also about, you know, what are the 1 or 2 points you really want to land in that discussion? And it's actually being very intentional about that when you're looking to sort of push a certain position. And I like, Erin, the way you described it.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Being almost cognitive as to, before you even coming into a meeting, maybe what are the things that you're really trying to get out of this meeting? Because sometimes you're right. Sometimes you can just go off in a slightly different direction, or you know, you want to feel like you're staying true to what your ideas were coming in, perhaps. So yeah, love that. Daniela,
You temper the passion with precision, which I'm going to write that down because you just had me think that, Sandra, and that's so important.
That's a great line. Yeah, brilliant. Daniela, anything there on your side in regards to this question?
Absolutely. So usually what I do is that I speak up anytime I'm really convinced about my idea, and it's the gut feeling or the fact that I have already discussed maybe with some smaller group of people before entering the meeting room. And so I know that at a certain point I will be supported even if part of the team is not in agreement with me. And so I try really to build like the confidence I can show in the meeting, also through my peers, because I think that if you are supported by your team or your peers on some ideas that is not shared by everyone, then it's easier also to get to the point and having the decision made.
Yeah, I love that actually. It's very true, Daniela. I mean, if you can get a bit of advocacy from somebody in the room or a panel or something like that prior, that's a very good point. I love that. And talking about moving through a little bit into sort of on the pay and recognition side, because let's be honest, you know, there's still a gender pay gap globally, and it is one of the big things that many women, certainly I'd say, you know, from midpoint in their career, you know, as they may be returning from maternity or something like that, that when they're then looking at trying to continue climbing that ladder, that they really struggle with. So from this question's perspective, confidence isn't just about speaking up in meetings, but it's also about advocating for yourself. How have you approached asking for maybe promotions, recognition, or pay rises? Is there a bit of a method or something that you fall back on now, or you use, or what's worked well for you in the past? Come to you with this maybe first, Sandra. Back up to you.
Sure. I mean, I think this is a very tricky one. You know, I think it's, I found it key to really frame the conversation around kind of the value you're creating, and will continue to create, rather than focusing on kind of what's fair or what I've done in the past. Those arguments don't generally work well. For me, it comes down to sort of three things. First, I think you really have to do your best to know the market and, understand kind of where your role fits in the broader kind of landscape. And then second is really focus on the impact you're having and the value you're bringing. And then lastly, and really importantly, don't make it personal. That is where you can often lose, you generally lose the argument if you make it more of a personal discussion. So I think try to take the emotion out of it and frame it almost like a business case.
Yes, very well said there. I think you've hit that absolutely spot on, especially your second point is knowing your impact, knowing what is that you're bringing to the table, where your value is. And sometimes you might need to share that or express that, but really going into those meetings, knowing that and not making it too personal, I think is very important. Erin, anything to add to this on your side?
My biggest learning on this topic was when I got people manager responsibility or managing people responsibility, because I was on the other side of those conversations. And so what I very quickly realized is it comes down to the tenets of negotiation, which I think most of us, when we get to senior roles, we've gone through some sort of training or life experience or both. And there's a criteria involved. So knowing the value, I think, is essential. And I'm so glad to hear Sandra say that, because I've talked to so many people where they don't even know what that role should pay. They're waiting for the company to tell them. And just like if you go out and you buy a house, you always benchmark what's in the neighborhood. You have to do that for yourself. And you have to have a very clear idea of what your USP, your unique selling proposition is. But even more so, especially around things like pay rises and promotions, every company, every ecosystem has a criteria. And it's sometimes hard to get to, but that should always be the first question. So for me, I always think, what would need to be true for my boss or my boss's boss to sign off on whatever it is I'm asking? Beyond the baseline of what we've heard around value created and demonstrating all the objectives I've achieved, et cetera, certain things have to be checked off an internal checklist, whether that's a real checklist or in someone's head. And so understanding that, especially around promotions, involves what does that level look like, and then calibrating yourself and making sure you work backwards a little bit. I think around recognition, that goes back to, and you're probably going to get to this a little bit later, to the theme of our discussion today, which is using your voice. So often, and I was guilty of this. I mean, I know I seem extrovert now, but earlier in my career, I sort of was shy about saying what I did because I didn't want to seem boastful. But so often the recognition comes from us not putting ourselves out there in the right ways. And so everything that we're talking about today affects your brand and how you show up, whether it's being in a meeting and being super precise, whether it's making sure that you're advocating for yourself in a very clear, values-based framework. All of that goes to how people see you and then how they want to reward you. So I would just say, for anyone listening who might be approaching, it is about getting to that time of year where you start to think about, okay, your reviews, promotions, pay rises, et cetera. It's not simply just going in with your list of things you've done. It's not about feelings. I love that one because we can get so caught up in it. Make sure you understand what hoops you're actually jumping through. Make sure you understand the cycle in which these things are done, which is a huge one, because you might get successful in March in a way you would not in October, for example, depending on your company. So it's all about working backwards, and I could go on and on this topic, but I'll shut it. No, I get really passionate about.
I know, but it's brilliant.
Not enough on the dollar, and then our lifetime earnings are less. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, no, really great advice there, Erin. I think it's, I mean, ultimately from Sandra, it's knowing your market, it's knowing what you're worth and your value and your impact. it's not getting too personal, bringing the emotions in, which is then what you've also said there, Erin. But then importantly, it's knowing what expectations you're trying to hit in the first place and understand what your markers are, which is a really key point, because you might think you're adding a lot of value, but actually to your boss's mind, if they've got certain levels of expectations that maybe have or haven't been expressed, then that's where, you know, that alignment can be off. So I completely agree with you, Erin, there. I think that's a really valid point. And Daniela, is there what's your thoughts in regards to this? Anything to add to that?
Yeah, so my very simple motto is that if you don't ask, you don't obtain. Okay, so I think that was always my way of asking for promotion and pay rises, because sometimes, I mean, my bosses at that time, they were not really interested, or maybe they were not thinking about it. And so this was the reason why I also managed to have to move from one role to the other in the same company for the first 15 years. So, and of course, you have to know your value, and you have to present your value to your bosses, or the HR, or whoever is talking to you about this topic, and then they will realize that you are really important for the company and for the role you are covering. So that's the only suggestion that I give.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, you know, ultimately that is what this topic title is: show up, stand up, speak up. It's making sure that once you've got all the things in your toolkit that Erin and Sandra have just expressed, it's doing exactly what you said there, Daniela, and it's just taking and having that confidence, I guess, just to go out and say it and to ask, which so many people just don't, and think, oh well, I'll just hang on and wait. But yeah, 100%. Right, we're whizzing through time here, but I'm really keen to talk a little bit about the imposter syndrome element, because, you know, it's definitely happened to me in my career. I think it's happened to most people that I know that have worked their way up as well, and been in a workplace environment for a period of time. So, you know, have you experienced it? If so, how have you managed to or reframe it in your career? You know, how have you overcome it effectively? Are there some sort of techniques that you've used? If I'm talking about my own personal experience, I remember 15 years or so ago, I used to get it a lot. It was my first real kind of, I was a manager of a couple of branches, and for me it was a lot of in the prep. For me it was about understanding exactly what I was walking into that meeting needing to provide, and the expectations that the owner wanted to know. And the imposter syndrome, I'd feel, would kick in. I'd almost be listening to myself if there was anything there that I thought I didn't have. So for me personally, it was a little bit at the time of like, right, I just need to make sure I've got all my ducks in the row. I know exactly what it is that's requested of me. I know how I'm going to present this. And then it just faded away. And then I was like, no, I've got confidence with this because I've now got it. So I don't know if there's something that you think, looking back in your time, or there's a trigger that's now helped you overcome ever experiencing that. I'll come back round the other direction. Let's go to Daniela. Let's go to you first with this.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I experienced it once, I would say. It was not really a pleasant experience. I was covering a role that basically was doubling another role already existing. So there was another person there before me, but it didn't leave the company. I mean, I was there working in parallel with the same kind of responsibility, but this person was there for many years before me, and of course, I mean, it was mostly impossible to work in this kind of environment, and so in any case, I found another job and I recovered and everything. But what I have promised to myself is that certain conditions have to be met once I change job, once I find the right role that I like, and I have to be aware of the environment and the scenery around me before accepting the job. And so that's something that I put in place when I talk to headhunters, asking certain questions in order to be sure that the condition I want to find in the new company, the culture, is really there.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. And Erin, what about yourself with this question? What's your thoughts?
So if I'm honest, I don't think I've ever gotten over the imposter syndrome. I think it's something we just experience each time we level up, so to speak, like a video game. Something that occurred to me was each time I would move into I don't know if it's a bigger room or a smaller table, I would look around the room, have that feeling of, oh my gosh, do I belong here? Am I going to fit in? And then very quickly realize that I'm surrounded by other human beings who are fallible and who may be thinking the same thing. So I immediately flip that to two emotions that I let course through me. One is gratitude for the opportunity to be there. And because I probably don't know everything, but I'm surrounded by really great people. I'm going to learn something from everyone at the table. Even if I have a work nemesis there, I'm going to learn something.
Yeah.
And then the second one is just, I don't know what the emotion is, but just grounding myself in that I deserve to be there. I didn't get there by accident. I didn't fall through the sky and land in a job title. Now, that's not, I think we all know people where we wonder if that happens. So I'm not end up in places by luck or maybe that we're not quite ready for. But I know that I worked really hard. And so then I wrap that in a feeling of what's the worst that could happen? The worst that could happen is that I screw up or that I fail. The absolute worst is that someone comes and calls me out and says, you're not right for this, which is not a rejection, it's a redirection.
Yes.
So, but
and you've
you know,
given it a go.
you have to pay bills and all of that. But so I think because I know I'll never get rid of that imposter syndrome, and also because society, the way it is today with women, we get those coded messages all the time to question ourselves, too much, too little, too fast, too slow, etc. I just lean into it.
Yeah.
And so that's probably not the most elegant framework, but that's how I get through it.
Yeah. I love the fact that you framed that, you know, imposter syndrome never really leaves you as you're moving up every level or you're doing something new and different, you know, and sometimes I think that what I've drawn myself back into is a bit of just like self-belief. It's like, you've got this. And, you know, do you know what? If it's not perfect, it's not perfect. It's absolutely fine. I definitely went through a big period of perfectionism in my, but I'm very aware of that now. And I realize, you know, done is sometimes better than perfect. And not everything has to be, you know, and yeah, in order to learn, you've got to put yourself outside of your comfort zone sometimes. And that's fine. So I love that, Erin. And Sandra, same question for you here.
Yeah, maybe I think Erin described it very well. I think that most of us feel imposter syndrome at many times in our career. And, you know, I think that the perfect antidote for this sort of imposter feeling is really, as Erin said, is that, you know, you say, do I measure up? You know, do I belong here? And I think you just have to reframe that you have your story, you know your value. That's one. And then the second thing is, I would just say preparation is your power. Right. So you going into those conversations where you're well prepared, you know your facts, you know, again, the where the objections might be, and ready to land your key points. And so I think that gives you sort of that confidence, and just you got to reframe. So
yeah, completely agree, Sandra. Very well said. And we've got some Chris here who's dialed in. She popped in Williamsburg. Thank you so much for joining. She's put, hey, that is how I ended up doing web design. I fell into it. I learned fast and I love challenges. And sometimes, as you put it, Erin, it's like redirection, isn't it? Don't see it as a failure. And actually, sometimes these things can end up being brighter and better in the long run. We've got a question here that we can probably end shortly on, because we're 42 minutes in already. A question here. So what should you do if you believe your boss will disapprove of you speaking up about something in a forum, especially with your performance appraisal depends on him? It can be difficult to raise the issue, even though you feel it is important to address it. What should you do if you believe your boss will disapprove of you speaking up about something in a forum? Well, I'm not sure who you are because you put a private setting in, but it's a good question. Who wants to answer this?
Well,
Erin,
I read it while we were talking. And so I'm a questions person. And so my first thought was, what would they disapprove of and why? Because disapprove is a very interesting choice of word. There's a lot of judgment behind it. It might be a language issue as well with translation, but I'm taking that, having worked for some interesting personalities in the past, and especially early in my career, that there's an element there of wanting to please or wanting to do the right thing. So I would make sure that you're very clear on what that disapproval entails and what's behind it. And then back to, I think it was Sandra who said, when we were talking about when to raise something, you look at the risk benefit. So if your performance appraisal is binary, generally. It should be. And if it's not, there are mechanisms within most organizations to course correct that. So if what you're raising, even if someone disapproves or doesn't like it, is beneficial to the business, then you go back to that calculation that we heard of in the beginning and you run the numbers and you say, okay, what's the risk? What's the benefit? The risk is I'm going to feel uncomfortable and they may not like it, but if this is something material to the business, I should do it.
Yeah, very well said, Erin. And my also thoughts to this as well is whatever it is that you feel that you might need to be speaking up about, does it need to be delivered in an open forum? Usually the term forum is when there's more than one person. Just do a bit of a calculated, again, risk and versus benefit as to, you might have a really valid point in which you want to bring up, but in what environment is it best to do so? Is it best to do it one-to-one with this individual as opposed to a forum? What's going to get the right response? And ultimately assess then, what's the outcome that you want from this? Because that will also help you analyze. Sorry, Sandra, were you? Yeah,
I just like, I agree. And I would just add that this is actually a great opportunity to think about allyship, so that you have people that you have bounced your ideas off of, so that when they're in that forum, potentially they can amplify your point. And just knowing that is sort of, that needs to be reciprocated. So I think that's where we can lift up each other and really build this allyship going into those types of meetings.
I think Daniela said that was her secret weapon, was having her allies before she jumped into something.
Perhaps. We've got a few other questions coming through. Anybody that we can't answer because we are already running literally over the time now, we can try and answer afterwards in the comments. But just to end up on, which is a bit of a close that we've tend to always done on Lift Up, is what one bit of advice would you give your younger self starting out? It could be a random bit of advice, or it could be advice on speaking up, finding that inner voice. Daniela, I'll come to you first with this question.
Yeah, I think that the best thing to do is really to build your confidence based on your competence, because in any case, your competence can be built with your background or learning on the job and what you have studied and so on and so forth, and being prepared for meetings and so on. But I think the best thing to do is also to build your confidence, thinking about your best performance and exercise your brain about your good shot. So I'm talking about shot because it's the same when you play golf. When you play golf or you practice golf, you have good shots and bad shots, but your brain usually remembers just the bad ones. And so the next time you just play very badly. Whilst if you try to exercise your brain to think about the good shots, then your brain will remember that the next time. And working is mostly the same. I mean, if you try to exercise the brain to think about the good like activities, that the good outcome of your activities during your working day, you think about it, you write them down, and you build the confidence on those.
Yeah.
So that's
Great
what
advice. Positive mindset, not glass half full. Yeah, 100%. Not focusing on those things that are more on the negative side. I love that. Thank you. And Erin, what's the one piece of advice you'd give your younger self?
Treat your career like a business plan. So keeping in mind that this is, for women in life sciences, something that I continue to observe as I coach and I mentor, something that I reflected upon in preparing for this, is how frequently, and it's not all women, but many of us let our careers happen to us for a variety of reasons. And it's tied into how much we want to speak up, how visible we feel comfortable being, how many sponsors, not just mentors, but sponsors we have internally. But if I could go back in time, I would ask my brain to leverage the strategic part of it and map things out the same way I do when I launch a product or run a project. Because if there is something that I do observe different between men and women in the workforce, and having managed both, most of the men that I managed came in and they had a North Star. They had a plan of how they wanted to get there, who they needed to talk to, which alliances that they built, which sponsors they got. And a lot of the women knew that they wanted to move up, but hadn't quite gotten that specific or calculated about it.
Yeah.
So since this is meant for advice for people, I think you're going to hear lots of good stuff, but I would just say it's kind of the ugly underbelly, but it is really, really important.
I love that. I think what you've said is really important there, because having a plan, having a North Star, having a strategy is really super important. Interestingly, I've spoken to some other speakers that have come on here to say, equally, it's okay for a career to not be like a career ladder, and you have to take these steps. And one lady, Lynn Sullivan, she described her career as a jungle gym. And it's okay if you pivot and you go into something different. But I think what you're saying here, Erin, is, it's okay to take different paths, but it's always knowing what that next step is, or the future steps, so you have a bit of a direction, and not let your career just happen to you. So I love that. I think it's really powerful. And Sandra, we could talk for ages about this topic, actually.
Yeah.
It's a great topic, but last
I
one
love
from
this. I love
yourself.
it.
Yeah.
If I could give one piece of advice, it would be, don't wait until you're 100% ready. Confidence comes really just from the action. So take the stretch role, say yes to the tough assignments, raise your voice in meetings. I really think that this preparation builds your foundation, and then, the presence in practice will build your confidence. And so, yeah, just say yes before you feel ready. And that's where confidence is born.
I love that. Thank you, Sandra. And I've left it up here on the screen for anybody that's not part of the community group already. We've got way over 2,000 followers already on this group. But you'll also see actually all future Lift Up Live broadcasts being advertised on there if you want to join any future ones. This is obviously a downloadable, viewable event post this going live. So we have nearly 3,000 rewatch these lives, which is phenomenal. So feel free to share with any of your colleagues. But thank you so much to the audience for dialing in, and importantly, thank you so much for our key speakers here that have joined us today. I've absolutely loved talking about this topic with you all. We're actually 6 minutes over the time scheduled, so we better dive out, but I've really thoroughly enjoyed it. So thank you very much for joining me today. And we'll see all of you that are dialing in for next month's broadcast. Thank you and take care. Goodbye.
Thank you.